All right, everyone. Welcome back. Here with Doug Petkanics from Livepeer. This is episode number 21 in one short month of Messari's Unqualified Opinions. Masochistic, perhaps, but we're repping through these pretty nicely and have had a terrific slate of guests so far, bringing you a little bit more information about some of the top teams and token projects in the crypto economy. Doug and I are going to have a wide-ranging conversation. We'll try to keep it as tight as possible, but Livepeer is doing a lot of interesting things, not just as an application, but also with respect to its token economics. So we're going to drill into that, talk a little bit about the Web3 versus DeFi theses right now, which is a hot topic that we and many others have started to cover as we think about Ethereum scaling and how applications can live on top of Ethereum or whether they might have to migrate. But first, I want to thank again our sponsors for this podcast. The reason that we now have not one but two mics for better sound quality, and you'll notice that I always give my guests the bigger mic just to even it out a little bit, since we've had previous guests that have literally sat on stacks of chairs to even out the height difference. So Doug doesn't quite have the same problem, but thank you to TokenSoft, who's working on digital asset compliance solutions, and Token Tax, who is making it a hell of a lot easier to report your crypto taxes. Recommend you check both of them out, and we'll have more details as we convert these into iTunes and Spotify podcasts where we can insert the sponsor snippets. But without further ado, don't want to keep our guests waiting while I talk too much about our sponsors or give an opening soliloquy. Doug, why don't we start super basic? Your path to Livepeer is really interesting because you've worked on this and market before. So talk a little bit about video transcoding and why this has to be decentralized, kind of where Livepeer fits into this market.
Sure thing. First of all, thanks for having me on the show here. 21 episodes in a month. It's prolific output. Glad to be part of it. Cool. So the basics of Livepeer, for those who don't know, Livepeer is building a video infrastructure platform. This is for developers and applications and media companies that want to do video and live video well at scale. It's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to operate infrastructure, to scale to many streams of video at once. So, people building things that look like YouTube or Periscope or Twitch, or media companies broadcasting big events could use Livepeer's infrastructure to power it. And my experience is as a software engineer building first data infrastructure platforms for local data about points of interest, processing lots of streaming information in real time, and then worked on a kind of consumer mobile startup where we had a lot of video specific features in our applications, and we kind of learned the experience of building on the kind of closed proprietary infrastructure providers. Challenges both in terms of building on them, but also in terms of the costs in operating on them. Mm-hmm. And so I'll fast forward past a lot of information, but what led my co-founder Eric and I to the Livepeer opportunity was that we saw the rise of Ethereum and we saw the rise of this idea of Web3, mm-hmm. and the notion that you could decentralize kind of resource allocation in terms of bandwidth, in terms of storage, in terms of compute. You could kind of deliver the next version of the internet the way it was meant to be, where you could put economics inside of open source software, inside of protocols, inside of networks, such that the people contributing the value to the networks were the ones who would kind of realize that gain, as opposed to everything existing in these closed walled gardens. And the whole Web3 story is a separate thing. But we saw, we had a lot of experience building infrastructure, building around video, and we saw kind of the tremendous advantage and kind of disruptive potential of creating a new type of video infrastructure that could run on a distributed global network where anyone with idle compute and idle bandwidth could add it to this network and could encode and distribute video. Mm-hmm. We believed in the opportunity. We spent 6 months researching it. We convinced ourselves that you could design a protocol that could secure this and could create the right incentives for people to bring it online. And we launched the proof of concept and eventually the early alpha production version of Livepeer, which came online 10 months ago, and it's usable for kind of video transcoding and broadcasting today.
Yeah. So I've called these in the past skin in the game tokens. People call them digital resource tokens, work tokens. A lot of different terms get thrown around. But structurally, the Livepeer token is similar to what you would expect for Filecoin for file storage or Golem for compute. Is that the right spectrum of assets to think about Livepeer and its value prop?
I think in this neighborhood of allocating resource, you can think of it as pretty similar. I think the token mechanics look a little different. So first of all, both of the tokens you just mentioned, my belief is that you're supposed to acquire them and pay them into the network. So you pay Filecoin in order to store files on the Filecoin network. That's actually not the case in the Livepeer ecosystem. In the Livepeer ecosystem, you get ETH and you pay it in order to transcode video on Livepeer. And eventually that should be a stable coin, so it could just be you pay US dollars to transcode video on Livepeer. And the Livepeer token's purpose is much similar to something you referenced, a work token concept that people talk about, where you actually acquire this token and you stake it on the network if you want the ability to do and secure work on this network and earn the ETH or the US dollars that are flowing into the network.
But the work is a combination of human capital and the computation and bandwidth that's required to do the transcoding, right? So you're still talking about contributing a scarce computing resource, just an individual doing the work. It's a bit of a combination.
Correct. So it's think of the token as you put down the security deposit in the form of the token, and then you now have the right to contribute this computing resource to the network to run a node that will encode video and serve it out. Or if you don't happen to have infrastructure and you don't want to run infrastructure, Livepeer protocol has this concept of delegation. You're just a normal MetaMask using token holder. You can delegate your token towards someone else who is running infrastructure, and they'll run it on your behalf and share in the fees and inflationary token they collect.
So it certainly is you've built a groundswell of support and a pretty solid community for an early stage product. So congratulations on that. The flip side to that is, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now about the timing of Web3, right? Do people care? Livepeer will get used at industry conferences and events, right? You'll see people set up the video feed and be sure to support it because it's an experiment and it's also potentially an interesting piece of Web3 infrastructure. But are we even close to that, right? In my mind, ICOs and collateralized debt positions might be the only two non-Bitcoin, non-payment applications that have really gotten legs. So where do you see Web3 and its development and what needs to happen for this to really be viable?
Yeah.
So we're having connection issues, it seems, so we're not getting the same stream output.
Okay, well, we're going to keep going because we've already started the recording. The recording should be fine, right? All right, so we'll edit that out.
Cool. Yeah, good question about Web3. So I think we're a long way to go before the full promise of Web3 is realized, right? We talked about things like Filecoin for file storage. We haven't seen that launch yet, or these other file storage networks. Certainly at the UI, UX layer, there's a lot of work to do before you have kind of this new decentralized internet. But our approach on Livepeer is, hey, this infrastructure is meant to be used and create dramatic kind of price disruption for existing scaled video applications in the Web 2 world. I believe that in Web 3 we'll see new amazing applications that you and I couldn't dream up, that a product visionary comes along and says, okay, I have decentralization, I have tokens, I have economics, how can I create this incredible video experience? Livepeer is designed today to be pluggable into existing kind of video infrastructure stacks and deliver huge cost savings. And there's a couple of reasons why we believe we can deliver huge cost savings and increase reliability. And it has to do with kind of, we don't need to get into the nuance and nitty gritty of the existing dynamics of this.
Well, can we talk about, just let's do a case study, right? To make it a little bit more tangible. So you say cost savings. I think a lot of digital resource tokens or work tokens, that is the pitch for how you can get over this adoption hurdle.
Yep.
Walk us through an apples to apples example, right? Cool. You guys are going to take on some centralized alternative.
Yep. So cloud providers who power video infrastructure, they would charge the user $3 per hour per stream for live video. So if your application, is like Periscope or Musical.ly or TikTok, you have hundreds or thousands of concurrent streams. That's $3 per stream while that's going on per hour. So really expensive, thousands of dollars an hour. It's prohibitive for startups, right? Now on the Livepeer network, we have this software that can harness idle video encoding power and GPU cryptocurrency miners. So people mining Ethereum, Zcash, Grin, etc. They're spinning the CUDA cores on those chips 100%, hashing cryptocurrency. But there's these two video encoding chips, the NVENC and the NVDEX, sitting there that are idle. They're doing nothing. They can't hash crypto. And Livepeer allows them to put that capacity on the network without disrupting their crypto mining. And their cost to doing that in electricity and bandwidth is about 74 cents per day. They can encode 2 HD videos, concurrently on that. So they can add it to this marketplace for 74 cents a day, but the cloud providers to encode 2 HD videos for 24 hours are charging $144. And so there's a huge gap between 74 cents and $144 for them to make a little margin, make a little extra revenue, but drive down costs tremendously for the end user.
So you guys are if I'm hearing you right, you're a beneficiary of the existing proof of work mining apparatus for GPU mining.
Yep.
Just by happenstance.
Just by happenstance, and this is an amazing.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, this is an amazing.
That's a hell of a stroke of good fortune. Yeah.
Yeah. It may not be available forever, and there may be it may change the way that these GPUs are constructed. But there's also the belief that kind of idle compute capacity will always be available, cheaper than dedicated capacity, where you're provisioning machines to handle your peak traffic when you have 1,000 streams, but they sit idle when you're only at 200 streams. And that's always going to be more expensive to build, deploy, and operate than this open marketplace that lets anyone put idle capacity on the network. If there's a protocol that can incentivize this to exist and be standing by, to secure it and trust that these anonymous nodes in the network are doing the work correctly and honestly. And the software is to be good enough to create reliable performance and whatnot. And those are all the challenges that we've been tackling for 2 years at Livepeer, and we'll keep iterating on.
So that makes the unit economics really compelling for some of the early adopters. So the typical margins on that seem like they're solid. In terms of the raw amount of work that's going into the alpha protocol right now, can you quantify that? I know you guys have been taking steps to track this much more actively and working with a number of data vendors to do so. What's the total throughput to the system right now?
Like usage on the network.
On network usage.
Yeah. So we launched an alpha. All these kind of great cost benefits that we just talked about, still need some software engineering to be fully unlocked, and there's a high cost of using the Ethereum blockchain to secure it. So what we've seen in the months we've been online is hundreds of events, conferences, meetups, live streams run through the network, and that's great for testing the software, but that's not scaled usage. That's not hundreds or thousands of streams concurrently, which is what you want. So to address kind of the cost issues of using Ethereum, the scalability, we knew we'd have this iteration to do, but we packaged up kind of 5 main updates to the protocol. We called it Streamflow. We're running an internal version of this already that's handling a couple hundred concurrent streams with high reliability. A couple of months of work to do to get it to mainnet, but we're at that point where we're ready to start working with scaled kind of users of this. So still very early, but have good promising results, and kind of this is the year where we go to market and create the real success stories on that.
How do you think about users versus investors? Because so many teams, you guys have been very careful about this. I think a number of other teams, especially more recently that are based in the US, are careful to not come across like a security by any means necessary. in the eyes of the SEC. And you can certainly make the argument that a useful protocol that is actually doing the work it's set out to do and transcoding video and using this token as a critical piece of that mechanism, you should steer away from that. And yet, there are now crypto funds that have taken a meaningful interest in doing work on Livepeer as part of this generalized mining theme that some have spoken about. How do you think about investors as stakeholders in light of the fact that you're a New York-based company? This is like the most hostile environment to have a venture fund speculating on a token and still keep you guys in the clear from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah, so stakeholders is an interesting term, I think, because I think everyone who's chosen to participate in this ecosystem really as kind of participating stakeholders, if you will. And we've designed the protocol and the incentives such that you're actually penalized for just acquiring this token and holding it as an investment. You only are actually receiving any benefit from that by actually participating and doing work in the network. And that's due to the economic design and the inflation that the protocol has built in. We can dig in if interesting, but the short version is the protocol mints new tokens every day. And it only goes to those who are doing work on the network. And in order to do the work, you need the token to place as a security deposit to secure the work that you're doing. And basically,
but you also need the bandwidth and compute.
If you're going to run the infrastructure, if you just want to, you can do a different form of work, which is essentially quality assurance and routing work towards the nodes with the right compute by just delegating.
Are funds doing both, or are they doing more of the latter? Okay.
Yeah. Funds are doing both. I mean, I don't know individually how everyone decides what their split is. The easiest thing to do is just to delegate, but you're kind of putting your trust in someone else's hands, and you can lose this token. They act maliciously. And so, again, everyone is kind of participating in making this network useful, whether you're running something, helping to build something, QAing and assuring it, and anyone who's just buying this token and sitting on it doing nothing, thinking it's an investment, is dramatically getting diluted away. Like their ownership in the network is going to be less than half of what it is today a number of months from now if they're not actually participating. And so again, the whole system is that like this token's purpose is to coordinate, to bootstrap and incentivize everyone to make sure this network is as cheap, effective, reliable, and useful as possible.
Well, and the counter to that is it might be one of the most punitive token inflation models for non-participants, which makes it seem that Livepeer's tokens maybe have to be one of the early test cases for exchanges to actually stake on behalf of their users, because otherwise their users are going to get diluted down, because that is not going to accrue and keep pace with the otherwise baked in inflation.
Yeah, I think this like staking as a service concept that's tied to the custody solutions or the exchange solutions is like definitely a trend we're going to see happening in this year.
And so right now I think Livepeer is just on Poloniex. Has it also been listed on Binance in terms of the major exchanges?
Not to my knowledge. Our team has done literally zero work with any exchange, including the ones that went ahead and listed it on their own. We put zero effort into secondary markets. It's on some decentralized exchanges, I think. But again, the network is in alpha. We've never done any like public sale or marketed this as an investment. It's very early. It's about like participating and bootstrapping the network. And so,
but just like any other investor, Circle comes to you guys and says, how the hell do we figure out the staking? You're going to work with them, right? Just like any other stakeholder.
I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about like the technical aspects of the project, how the token is designed itself. But I get thousands of emails every day from, hey, would you like to pay us a fee to list on this exchange? And that's a straight ignore to the trash. Or even the polite personal ones, I'll just respond and say, hey, we're not working with exchange. Right now, we need this network to be highly useful and have a lot of kind of successful usage and case studies before we would ever talk about this as kind of an investment sort of asset.
So let's talk a little bit more about the inflationary aspect, because I think right now you guys, if I remember reading correctly on Scout, it was 50% target bonding, and you're at about 30% right now, which is pretty good, I think, for staking tokens. I don't know if anyone else has hit that number yet. I haven't checked recently for some of the others like Tezos and EOS, but my general understanding is they struggle with quorum and participation and just general staking. Is that the highest that you've seen? How do you benchmark your own staking, and then how do you think about like long-term bonding rates and setting that target? Because the other 50 or 70% of people that are not staking are losing so much so quickly.
Right.
So it's almost a question of what are the defaults.
Right. Good question. So I actually can't tell you if that's the highest or not the highest. I suspect some other networks may have a higher staking rate, but I believe that the distribution mechanics that they used actually, a lot of token ended up in the hands of people who were, immediately thinking about staking it, whereas we did this very wide Merkle-mined public distribution mechanism.
And it's also passive proof of stake versus actually putting in work.
Yeah, and so, but interesting question about how we think about the target. So what we did with Livepeer is, instead of setting a known issuance rate with known inflation, where I could tell you exactly how many tokens there's going to be 2 years or 3 years or 4 years from now, we said, well, we don't think that's the right approach. What we said is, we're going to set a known participation rate. And we said we want 50% of the tokens staked and participating at any one time. And what will happen is, every day that there is less than 50% participation, the inflation rate will rise a little bit. And every day that we've exceeded 50% participation, it will decrease a little bit. And the thesis is that the network will arrive at some equilibrium inflation rate. Maybe it's 7%, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 40%, where about 50% of the network stays bonded and participating, and the other 50% decide to withdraw and choose liquidity over this kind of lockup with participation. And so far, it's worked out really nicely because, as you said, the inflation rate has risen by design, and that's incentivized two things to happen. One, people who have this token or discover this project or whatever realize that they should stake, and they come online and they become a participant in this network. And then the second thing is, it's, all the inflation is staked amongst the people who've already staked, and it's increasing their ownership at the expense of the people who aren't staking. And if you look over like the first 3 years of the project, I believe a large percentage will go to people who are actively participating. And that's what you want. You want the people who spent the first 3 years, running the infrastructure, queuing the network, helping to build the software, et cetera, to be kind of the big stakeholders in this network. And we've have over 1,000 people staking, a nice community. It's growing every day, and it's so far the thesis is being confirmed. And I think what we've seen since we've launched in 10 months ago is that on the supply side of the network, the superpower of being able to bootstrap these crypto networks through crypto economics, the double-edged sword of speculation that are designed, has worked. People are doing what we hoped they would do, and then I think we feel good about the network on that side. Now, it's time to tackle the demand side and deliver real value to real users of these networks.
So what does that look like? What success? I mean, the core KPI is it hours of transcoded video?
Yeah, that's right. It's basically...
Did I nail it?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's how many hours, how many concurrent streams of video are flowing through this network, how much work is being done. Essentially, the proxy.
And where are you at the alpha right now?
It's like just hundreds, right? Hundreds of streams, but intermittent, non-scaled usage. Though still, I think successfully, having hundreds of streams that can use this network in an open sense, anyone can test it.
And the irony, by the way, is not lost on me that our sound engineer came in and mentioned we were having connectivity issues. I think due to the WeWork Wi-Fi. But I want to say it's probably karmic that this is the first time we've had connectivity issues. and it's probably Doug fiddling with the Wi-Fi because we're not using Livepeer yet, but we certainly will be adding those capabilities in the coming months.
You should see me try and do live demos of live streaming. It's like the riskiest possible thing you could ever try and do.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's always fun when that works, but you run into issues all the time.
On the roadmap, I mean, you're focused on utility. How can other people get involved? What is what's the call to action and kind of the next step as you build not only the team but the community?
Yeah, so there's a couple different stakeholders and products in the ecosystem, because first of all you have the supply side, which is your token oriented crypto network participant, right? Mm-hmm. And the step there is I really would just invite you to start staking and participating in the network. Our distribution mechanism gave a little bit of Livepeer token to all ETH holders as of March last year. Mm-hmm. So many of you listening may even have some Livepeer token, and just you can go to explorer.livepeer.org, stake it on a node, and you'll start seeing inflation flow your way every day. And that's a great way to learn about it. Join our chat room on Discord, our forum, ask questions, and there's community grants program with requests for community contributions, content, translation, building things around that. So that's great. And then you look at product number 2 as actually nothing at all to do with crypto. This is for video developers. Mm-hmm. And fitting into the existing video ecosystems and developer stacks. And there's probably not a lot of you listening right now who happen to be full-time video infrastructure engineers, mm-hmm. but that's the end user of Livepeer. And we go to industry events, conferences, meetups, and our product efforts are all focused around, well, these users shouldn't have to know anything about crypto or blockchain. They should be able to leverage this network superpower directly. And that's actually kind of the charter of the role of we have a Livepeer, the company, which is just how can we reduce friction? How can we make this network really easy to use? And open source developers, contributors, people in the video industry have a kind of opportunity to get into the project on that side.
Awesome. Yep. Well, Doug, thank you so much for swinging by.
Yes.
And good luck this year. For those of you who had connectivity issues, maybe it was everybody that was watching live on the Periscope, I don't know, we're going to find out. This has been recorded successfully. And we're going to be putting it onto iTunes, Spotify, and a number of other channels later today or first thing tomorrow. So we'll edit out any disruptions. We'll get this in your hands. And this is probably a good forcing function to make sure that everybody subscribes to the new Messari Unqualified Opinions podcast. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ryan.